Morning. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Vicki Englert. I'm the founder of Compiler, the small software consultancy that hosts these. We're super excited to have you here this morning. Thanks for coming out despite the rain. We'll hopefully be doing these a little more often this year, so keep an eye out for that. I think February 28th even is our next one, but you'll find out online. So I'm excited to introduce Ryan this morning from Caltrans District 7, right around the corner. Ryan's got a very interestingly timed presentation for us. I think that a lot of you are here just for that this morning. So I'm going to keep it short and sweet. And thanks, Ryan. Let's go.
Thanks, Vicki, and thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. As getting started with this, I have to preface it by saying this is a plan that we started really back in May and June, and it was a plan where we were told we have to finish up by the end of the year. Some things happened and that got pushed back a little bit, but the day we were to release a draft was the day the fire started. So draft is still not released yet to the public, but it will be coming out soon, and it's kind of pushed back our community engagement effort and the like. But and the picture on the far right up there, some of those structures I don't believe still exist anymore. But this is a project that was really initiated at the highest levels in the state. I mean, our director, Tony Tavares in Sacramento, was very much behind this, as well as Tokes Omishakin, the Secretary of Transportation for the state. It had become such a high priority. There were so many crashes and fatalities and the like that it became a really high priority for Caltrans to do something about the safety of the Pacific Coast Highway, especially in Malibu. So that's where the initiative for this came from, and they really pushed us hard, and we were given a very tight deadline. The study area for this plan is the city of Malibu, and after this, we do have another planning effort where we're going to plan the segments between the McClure Tunnel in Santa Monica and Malibu, and then further north on the Ventura side. But right now, the focus of this is really on Malibu. And we have a number of goals. And the first goal was to reduce crashes and crash severity. You know, when the 4 women from Pepperdine were killed a couple years ago, that just really shocked the community on top of all the other fatalities that they've been having. And so it became a real priority. Simultaneously, you want to make safer accommodations for people who are bicycling or walking out there, as well as to make things more accommodating for people who are using public transit. The community, the city of Malibu, and we've worked very closely with the city, they really want the Pacific Coast Highway to better fit in with the context of their community as well. Right now, it's too much like a racetrack, and it feels like a highway running through a community. And if you happen to live or work or visit that community, it's not a great match. So just to improve the character and have it fit better into the context. We also need to preserve emergency access and access to beaches and mountains and businesses. Became very evident with the fires how important getting in and out of there is. And it's not just fires, it's landslides and other things out there that crashes as well. All the ambulatory calls that are out there, people need to get through. And so it's really important that way. It's also an evacuation route. So these are our primary goals, and they somewhat conflict with one another sometimes. So a lot of this planning effort was a matter of sort of how do we balance these goals and how do we try to achieve as much as we can with each one of them, and what is the correct balance. For example, when we want to improve the character of PCH, there was a lot of sort of initiative in the community to make the central part much more like highways to boulevard, or a main street where people can be and feel safe and all of that. So putting a landscape median in as an important part of that. That does interfere with emergency access. And Pacific Coast Highway it's one in and one way in and one way out. There aren't alternatives going east-west through there. So a lot of what we try to do is balance those goals. The steps that we took were to collect information, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. We had a pretty extensive community engagement effort, and that's still ongoing. Doing some analysis of what our options are and looking at the data, then developing project concepts, bringing those back to the community, and then a draft and final study. We had a number of public events starting in July of last year. We had our first community charrette. We did that both in person and online, and then we did some more workshops in person and online, and we were planning to do more in January, and that got pushed back, and right now we're just waiting for the city. So, they're preoccupied with dealing with, recovery and so forth right now. So as soon as they say we're ready to go, we'll have another workshop and another online virtual workshop. So we start with a crash analysis. If safety is our issue, we need to kind of understand what's causing the crashes. And so we looked at that, looked at the different crash types, and try to understand what's happening out there. So if we were to apply a set of what we call countermeasures to make it safer out there, we have to kind of understand what is causing the crashes. So that was important. We also want to know where are the priority areas. And you see this white area here, which is really, and this is the area where the Pepperdine women were killed. That's where we really had to focus a lot of our attention. People are going very fast there. So that was a really important area to address. And we also looked at where bicycle and pedestrian crashes were occurring to try to understand that. So there was sort of a five-fold approach to our community engagement. That was first with the community workshops and a charrette. The first one was a charrette and workshops, and like I said, both virtual and in person. We did 2 different rounds of surveys. We had an interactive website, which is still up. We also had quite a few stakeholder meetings. So we had different groups that we met with individually, and some individuals who were very connected in the community, and social media as well. And it was a bit of a challenge. I mean, one of our challenges is we had a community of people who live in Malibu who are very interested in what goes on there. And that's where we had our workshops. And we wanted to respond to them. But Malibu and the Coast Highway there, it's a state highway. It has to also serve people from LA who go to the beach there, or who go hiking there, or who go to restaurants there. And there is an issue of people with, disadvantaged people. This is their beach access. So having to sort of balance responding to what the people in the community want with understanding that it's also serving people outside, it was a real challenge. And how do we reach a huge audience in the whole region area? I mean, we didn't really attend. We did have quite a bit of local television coverage, and we tried to spread out as much as we could, but as always, still faced, the people in Malibu thought we were paying too much attention to the people outside, and some of the agencies representing outside thought we were paying too much attention to people in Malibu. So, that's one of the things that we, run into. The July workshop was a really important starting point for us. This was a charrette format. If you're familiar with the charrette format, it's an attempt to get the attendees to actually participate in the formation of the plan. And we identified 5 different typologies of the highway and the adjacent land uses in there. So the one up at the top left is sort of what you run into first when you come into Malibu, mountains on one side and houses along the beach on the other side. As you get further in to this second one here, this is the Carbon Beach area, housing on both sides. And it's getting into a pretty sort of busy part of the town. And then you get to this bottom left here. This is the central commercial area near the pier. And by the way, these other two types are also found in other segments of the Coast Highway. So they were representative. The one up there is a very specific place. That's central area near City Hall between Cross Creek and Webb Way. And then the last one there is sort of nothing on either side of the highway. It's just open, even though there's homes closer to the beach. The highway itself doesn't have adjacent land uses. So for each one of these 5 typologies, we broke the people into work groups. Tell us, what are your priorities as to far as what you would like to see in the cross-section of the highway? We've got limited space. I mean, here's the other thing. We've got a limited space to play with. We've got all these different competing goals. How do we best mix that limited space? So the different types of cross-section elements might be obviously travel lanes, turn lanes, bike lanes, walking areas, parking on the mountainside, parking on the beach side, bus lanes, so, and a number of others. So we have all these things, and we ask people for each one of these typologies, what are your preferences? What are your, if we can't have everything in there, what are you willing to give up? What do you really want to see stay in the highway? And so that gave us an initial readout as to how we can start to plan, because something's got to give. We don't have enough space to do everything out there. So something's got to give if we're going to change. Our stakeholder meetings, these are pretty much the list of the different stakeholder groups that we met with. There were some local residents who were very engaged and vocal. And I mean, one of them had his daughter was killed back around 2010 or 11, and he started an organization that's been very active since that time. And some other residents, one of them who just got elected to city council, but city staff, highway patrol, the sheriff, the fire department, a labor exchange. So Pepperdine Coastal Commission, Mountains Recreation, and Chamber of Commerce, Streets for All, Streets for Everyone, Surfrider Foundation. So these were the groups that we had individual stakeholder meetings with to try to get their input, individually, and give them. I mean, these were hour, sometimes 2-hour-long meetings. We really wanted to hear from all of them. So, and when we had the first round, we did the charrette, but we also did the same kind of thing in a virtual workshop. We asked people, and we had this survey online. Again, for these different 5 typologies, what are your priorities? What are you willing to give up? Rank them. Bike lanes, sidewalks came out number 1 and 2. Bus stop improvements, were also very important. And when we got down to parking on the beach side was more favored than parking on the mountain side. But we noticed that those are getting lower on our priority list. Keeping the center turn lane was kind of lower on the priority list. If we have to get rid of the center turn lane to create space for bike lanes, people seem to be willing to do that. The one thing that ranked dead last in every survey and everything we did was keep the highway the same way. Okay, we had been under a lot of pressure to do something. And there were people who who were complaining that Caltrans is just not doing enough out here. We're not ambitious enough to try to make changes that are necessary to make the Pacific Coast Highway safer. So we said, okay, we're ready to do assertive, aggressive things that are necessary, and we seem to have enough support for this to move forward. So we also had a second round of workshops and surveys. For this, we got over 1,200 responses. A lot of the people were recreational visitors. Some, quite a few were local residents. So it was kind of a mix of people who responded. And the results of sort of a gross summary of it was protected bike lanes came out very heavily favored. And they were favored, in other words, physically separated. They were favored more than just striped bike lanes. One-way protected bike lanes on both sides was favored over two-way protected bike lanes on one side, although not heavily. People really liked the landscape median in the central area. And parking on one side and parking on both sides were about evenly favored, but parking on the beach side was favored over parking on the mountain side if we have to get rid of parking somewhere. So the beach side parking was more valued than the mountainside parking. And again, no change consistently came in last. So we looked to make changes. I also threw out a couple bigger ideas just to get people's reaction to things. And one of them was what I call the national park-like option. If you go to some of our national parks, you can only get in by bus. Denali National Park is like that. For a while, there was restrictions, I think, even in Yosemite, but nowadays you can drive in there. But there are places where buses are given priority to get into our national parks. And when you think about it, the context of Malibu, I mean, it is a national recreation area. There's a lot of state parks out there. The mountains and the beaches, both of them separately, are world class. They're gorgeous. I mean, this is equal to a national park setting. And what if we decide that the highway respects that setting as much as we do other national parks, where we take a lane out from traffic? We just have one lane each direction for cars, one direction or one lane for buses, and do the full bike lane treatment, make sure that the bikes can get in and out safely. This would require a whole lot more bus service than we have now. It would need, kind of like Laguna Beach has parking lots with shuttles that take you from beach to beach or place to place. I mean, that would be part of the scheme, but 62% of people said they strongly support that idea. I mean, this is a radical change, but a lot of people really, really like the idea. And the other option we put out there was a beach access option. On the far north end, or actually west end, whichever you want to call it, the traffic volume has dropped quite a bit, and we could get by without 4 lanes. We'd do 2 lanes, which would enable us to put in angled parking on the beach side, add parking there, make sure we've got really good bike lanes, and 71% of people said they strongly support that. So that was, I thought, interesting. So then we looked at, what are the tools, the toolbox? What kind of tools can we use? What countermeasures can we apply to fix the highway? And we looked at all these roundabouts, and I'll go over these sidewalks, new sidewalk, buffered bike lanes, protected bike lanes, staggered parking, reducing the lanes, angled parking, emergency access medians. So we looked at these different countermeasures. People really like the roundabouts. Roundabouts do have a very good safety record. They are significantly safer than signalized intersections. They also have generally capacity of about 30% more capacity to handle traffic than a signalized intersection. They eliminate conflict points. So we proposed roundabouts at 9 different locations. There were some areas where there are no sidewalks at all, and there are some areas where there's no sidewalk like leading up to a bus stop. So we needed to add it there because you absolutely have to be able to have ADA access to a bus stop. And when we're adding the angled parking, we wanted a safe place for people to walk to the beach. So right now, people are parking along the beach, and they're doing two things that we really don't like. They're walking in the highway from their parked car to the beach. It's very narrow. Or they're parking on the mountainside and running across the street and walking along the highway. And that was, two crash types that we really wanted to eliminate. And so being able to, again, do away with the travel lane each direction, angled parking, put nice sidewalks so people can have a safe place to walk. So so this kind of shows where we added sidewalks. And by the way, I don't know how you're familiar, last year Senate Bill 960 passed. That requires Caltrans to have good bicycle and pedestrian facilities on state highways. The segment of the Coast Highway, let's see, right here, Las Flores Road, Carbon Canyon, just as you're coming into the city, there are no sidewalks. There are no sidewalks, and it's very narrow. And so we absolutely felt that we had to add sidewalks there. And in order to do that, in order to find the space for the sidewalks, we're proposing taking out the center turn lane. And it's a bit of an issue because some people that live there are saying, well, how am I going to turn left and come out of my home, or how am I going to get in and out of my home? So it is a real issue, but we have to put sidewalks there, and we have to put bike lanes where we've got. So that was something we absolutely needed to do. We proposed buffered or colored bike lanes and protected bike lanes the entire route. Now up here on this map showing the purple area could be either this physically separated, the protected bike lanes as an option, or the other one is just what we call buffered bike lane. So it's a bike lane that has a little bit of painted stripe separating the bike lane from the travel lanes. And here is also another issue with different stakeholders. Most people want protected bike lanes out there. The city is not crazy about that because a lot of the people who are bicycling out there right now are experienced cyclists. They're the club riders that ride in big groups, and they're concerned, and I agree with their concern, that having a protected bike lane will confine their movements a bit. And they're worried about trash collection. If we have protected bike lanes, we're going to have to make sure that we sweep them, because that is an issue with those kinds of bike lanes. So for this is a feasibility study. We said both are feasible. The area shown in green there, that's the Carbon Beach area that just burned. There's a lot of homes along there, a lot of driveways, and it's not a great place for protected bike lanes. There's a lot of conflicts with driveways and parked cars. So that was planned to be just striped and colored bike lanes. We proposed staggered parking. So in order to, again, eliminate the issue of people parking on the mountainside and crossing over, and to add bike lanes, to get the space to add bike lanes, we removed parking from one side, on the mountainside, where the beaches are. There is a stretch near Winding Way, which is a really popular trailhead for Escondido Falls. It's a really nice waterfalls. And so in that area, we left the parking on the mountainside, close to where the trailhead is. The parking lot for that is like 13 spaces, something like that. And so people frequently park along the road and walk. So we left it on that side, but eliminated that on the beach side in that area. And so these are the areas where we reduced the lanes and added angled parking, mostly on the west end. So some other tools here: traffic calming trees that have canopy. Do calm traffic. That area where I showed you again, the Carbon Beach area, that had so many crashes, that's where people are speeding. The guy who hit the four women 2 years ago was going 104 miles an hour. So we're looking for different techniques to slow the traffic, and it's not easy to find, in a context like that, to slow traffic down. But putting islands with trees between parked cars is a technique that we hope to use out there. We put new crosswalks in, and where we put these crosswalks in, we're planning to actually, right at the crosswalk, do some things to slow the vehicles down, channelize them, put some crossing islands in there for pedestrians, and signals. So new signals. So these were, we put a few new of these crosswalks in, hoping to slow cars down. So, and some new crossings where people need to cross. So, and this map shows where we put new or improved pedestrian crossings. People really like the idea of gateways. Gateways kind of tell you that you're entering a new context, a different sort of place, and maybe you need to slow down while you're going through here. Treat it differently. It's not an open highway anymore. You're coming into a community. So, and the idea of being able to have some public art, use the gateways as public art, was something that people liked. So we kind of looked at 3 different places that would be appropriate for gateways. We measured the entire stretch with a laser device. So we have fairly accurate measurements of either curb to curb or pavement edge to pavement edge. The one thing we didn't get, there's a lot of encroachment from people who live on one side of the highway and have encroached into the right of way, and we don't have good records of that, so we kind of had to work with what we know we've got. If we get records, that could change the plan, but we took the information we had and planned the cross section for every stretch. And I'm just showing you a couple samples here, and we gave options. So here's that really tight stretch there between Las Flores and Rambla Vista. That's where we had to get rid of the turn lanes. We added the sidewalks, colored bike lanes, keep the 4 lanes of traffic. Here was a little bit further up, maybe an emergency vehicle lane in the middle or a turn lane in the middle, buffered bike lanes. So we did the same kind of thing the whole way. And here's getting into that commercial area where we could have without the landscape median or with the landscape median. And then we did a few renderings to show what the landscape median might look like. This is keeping the same sidewalk and just adding the median. Or what if we took out the parking and added widened sidewalk space, create some place for outdoor seating and dining and the like. So just another option for people when it comes decision time to think about. And we did the same thing all the way up to the north city limit, different options. So those were the linear improvements. We also looked at the intersections that had, the 11 intersections that had the most crashes. And we applied a set of countermeasures to each one of those intersections. And I won't go through all those, but just to give a sample, here's a place at Bonsall Drive and Westward Beach Road. There's a curve there of people coming out and they can't really see because of the vegetation. So we planned a number of things there. And one option is to put a roundabout in. Roundabouts don't have to be round. In this case, it would be oblong. And here's a roundabout. So the Webb Way roundabout is the only multi-lane roundabout that we proposed. But that could be also serve as a gateway. And the advantage of this is that that's a 7-lane highway out there. It's huge. It's not hospitable to human beings. And to try to tame that little bit, with roundabouts, you don't need turn lanes. So you can take 7 lanes down to 4 and have a safer, more beautiful intersection. So that was something we proposed there. And then the intersections of Las Flores and Rambla Pacifico Street had a lot of issues. So we proposed some protected bike lanes there and some curb extensions and a number of things to just kind of slow down and tame the traffic and provide space for people and bikes to go. So we did that sort of thing in all different techniques at all the 11 intersections. Also looking at vehicle to everything applications. So this is a conversation we were having a couple of us before. V2X is communication. So we've got vehicle to vehicle communication where one car talks to another, say, I'm here, don't hit me. We've got vehicle to infrastructure communication, which we're about to embark on a plan to put this sort of thing in district-wide on the state highway system, where we'll have communication equipment that will talk to the cars and notify them of all sorts of things up above. But the type of thing that this communications equipment could do is have speed enforcement cameras, and that actually was passed by the state legislature to put them out there. Cameras that communicate in real time with the sheriff. If somebody's going 85 miles an hour, the sheriff will know about it right away and have information on them. The technology that we've got will work much better when each vehicle has a transponder to receive that technology, or that communication. So we're not there yet, but in time that will happen. Emergency vehicles will be able to communicate to drivers much better that they're coming. And now in the future, we're going to be able to actually manage vehicle flow in a way that says speed limit's 45, your car can't physically go faster than 45. It'll be governed that way. And this kind of thing, could be a real solution to places where we were struggling to find countermeasures to slow the vehicles down. So things to come. We also did a parking analysis. So one of the issues we're really running into, the Mountains Conservancy Recreation Agency and the Coastal Commission do not like any loss of parking. They view that as access. And so what we did to try to address that was we removed parking in some places, but with that angle parking, we added a lot of parking spaces. And we believe that we added them in places where they are more valuable than the places we removed them from. So we ended up with something on the order of 900 approximately gained spaces. And we are also adding some 300 bicycle parking spaces. We're still not quite there with the Coastal Commission, but especially the Mountains Recreation Authority, Conservancy Authority. They just want us to not remove any parking anywhere. So that's an ongoing issue. Produce some planning level cost estimates, identified funding sources, and then did a sort of a short-term project list, medium-term project list, and this is really rough right now, and long-term project list. And then we've got a website with a portal and all of that. So that concludes the presentation, and I can open it up for questions and comments. Yes, thank you.